Shabbat Shalom, everybody. This is Rabbi Marcus Rubenstein from Temple Sinai, broadcasting live from the sanctuary of Temple Sinai in Middletown. The sanctuary misses you all. I wish I could be with you here on this beautiful Sabbath. It's Friday right now. Of course, we can't record this on Shabbat, but it's just here. I figured you could have some words of Torah, some inspiration for the Sabbath. So I figured I would talk for you now. Our parshiot this week are so important. Parshat Behar and Parshat Bechukotai. This week we end the book of Leviticus. We end the book of Vayikra. Behar is specifically about the 7th year. It's specifically about the Shvi'it, the 7th year, in which we leave the land fallow on the 7th year. We let the land rest on the 7th year. And we work all the rest of the 6 days of creation. We work the land. And on the 7th year, we let it rest. Because the land of Israel, according to God, deserves a land of rest. Deserves a day of rest, just like the Jewish people do as well. Very important. And it makes sense now. We see many people doing this in the farming world anyway. They rotate fields, and they let fields rest. And this is what we're told, the Torah tells us to do, is let the land rest, let the land have a Sabbath every 7th year, because we know that as Jews, the land of Israel is a holy land. It's holy, and we are supposed to keep the land holy, right, by letting it rest on the 7th year. There's also Jubilee, which is every 7 times at 7 years. On the 50th year, all debts are remitted so that everybody can return to their ancestral landholding. Because let's say you were becoming poor, you were going into debt, you had to sell your land to somebody else. All of a sudden, you didn't have land to live on, and you weren't living on your ancestral holding. Right? What does ancestral holding mean? According to Jewish law, those who left Egypt were, this is all coming from Baba Batra and the Talmud, that those who left Egypt were able to therefore get an inheritance for their family in the land of Israel. And even though we know that those who left Egypt didn't quite make it to Israel, only their children did, their family have an ancestral holding in the land of Israel. For this reason, that is why it's so important that each tribe has an ancestral holding. Right? If you see maps of ancient Israel, if you see maps of the tribes, of where each tribe was in the land of Israel, they actually maintained their place where they were so for that reason, in order to maintain those places, right, they needed to maintain the land they actually had. So all the land returned back to their original families every 50 years. So all land that is sold in the land of Israel is specifically a land lease agreement. It's more like a long-term lease than an actual sale, because where does the land belong to? The land belongs to God. The second parsha is the parsha of bechukotai, and on this parsha we end the book of Vayikra, the book of Leviticus. This parsha is mostly about blessings and curses. That if we walk God's ways, if we study the Torah, if we observe the mitzvot, that we will be blessed, and if we don't, we will be cursed. Now, an interesting question was asked by my students in the Parsha class this week, and it's a question that's often asked. If you look just at how many blessings there are to how many curses there is a lot more curses than blessings. There's only about 1 paragraph of blessings, but there are many paragraphs of curses. There's tons of curses. Right? Why does this make any sense? If anything, there should be more blessings than curses. Why would you be punished more than rewarded? That makes no sense. And if anything, wouldn't it at least be fair enough that the reward should be commensurate with the curses? Right? That the blessings and the curses should be equal? Certainly not the other way around. All the more so that curses should be more than the blessing. Right? That's very, very, I would say, an astute observation. It's a very strange thing, especially to end this holy book of the book of Leviticus. Why? And I explained to my class that the Jewish people have a sacred destiny. We have a contract that creates our identity as a Jewish people. We have a covenant with the Lord. our families signed around 3,000 years ago on Mount Sinai that said that we would follow God's laws, God would be with us. Right? Now, when you look at a contract, and all of us sign contracts all the time, maybe some of us have contracts we've signed for our jobs, for what we do, but at least contracts for homes, rental agreements, whatever they may be. But usually you forget about the contract. Right? Usually you sign a contract. In the good cases, you forget about the contract. Right? And why? Because you're fulfilling your side of the contract. The person you signed the contract with is fulfilling their side of the contract. Right? Everyone's okay. You forget about the contract. When do you remember the contract? When you don't follow the contract. Right? That's when your partner sues you. They bring you to court. You have this. Then you have had that lawyers look at finally at every single word of the contract and have to comb it through and then you get punished and it's horrible and then you'll never forget that contract ever again. Right? The contracts you forget are the contracts that kind of worked out. Right? And I think for that reason there's more curses than blessings. As Jews, it's a harsher responsibility to not follow our destiny than the blessing we perceive in following it. It's very, very interesting. We Jews are tasked with being who we are. By being Jews, by acting as Jews in the world, by doing mitzvot, by living our ways through Torah, by being righteous before the Lord, by being an or l'goyim, by being a light to the nations. And if we don't follow that, and we just try to be like everybody else, and that's it, it's going to be bad for us. We don't have license just to be like everybody else. We have to be an or l'goyim. We have to be a light to the nations. We have to be righteous. We have to follow God's laws. It's actually harder to observe the Torah. It's harder to be a Jew than a non-Jew. Some say, right? Jews have 613 mitzvot and non-Jews only have 7. Right? Because Jews have a higher responsibility because we historically signed this contract with God. That contract gives us a sacred identity. Now, going back to Parshat Behar, I'd like to ask a specific question about Shemitah and Behar here. There's a question that's asked in the Torah. I'm going to read this passage for you on page 741 in the 8th time. You have that at home, or Vayikra chapter 25, verses 18 through 22. The Torah says, "You shall observe my laws and faithfully keep my rules, that you may live upon the land in security. The land shall yield its fruit, and you shall eat your fill, and you shall live upon it in security. And should you ask," this is verse 20, "what are we to eat in the 7th year, if we may neither sow nor gather in our crops?" Then God says in verse 21, "I will ordain my blessing for you, don't worry, in the 7th year, so that it shall yield a crop sufficient for 3 years. When you sow in the 8th year, you will still be eating old grain of that crop. You will be eating old until the 9th year, until its crop comes in." Basically, don't worry that you're not going to work on the 6th year. Don't worry that you're not going to work on the 7th year. Right? Don't worry, you'll have enough fruits and you'll have enough vegetables to eat through, because I will make the land grow extra bounty on the 6th year, so that you'll be blessed in the 7th, 8th, and even 9th year. That's what the Torah says here. And okay, makes sense, right? You'll be blessed. Don't worry, God will take care of you. Right? It's a holy land. God can make the fruits grow. He created the fruits. He can make them grow. He can make the vegetables and the grain grow if he needs to make them grow. But what is really interesting here, because God does miracles in Torah all the time, what is really interesting here is the question that is asked in verse 20. Usually when a question is asked on the Torah, it's asked by later rabbis. Usually rabbis, the way Midrash is done, they see a superfluous word in the Torah or a superfluous phrase, and they say, well, why was this written this way? Why this extra word? Why this extra letter? Why this extra phrase? Whatever it may be. Right? And then they proceed to say, well, don't worry, that extra phrase here, lest you ask this question. Therefore, the Torah answers with this extra phrase or extra word. The Torah relies only on hints that come from words and letters, which the rabbis, our rabbis of blessed memory, the great sages of the Talmud and the Mishnah and the Midrash, later explicate and interpret and widen and give answers to. That's the usual Jewish way. The usual way is not for the Torah itself to ask questions on itself. Right? The Torah doesn't actually ask kushiot on itself, right? In a manifest way, in a revealed way. That's not common. You only see it very rarely, and this is one of the rare places in which you see the Torah actually asking a question herself. It says, and should you ask, what are we to eat the seventh year if we may neither sow nor gather in our crops? What are we going to eat? The Torah is actually asking the question that's in your head. I think that's in many of our heads. Right? If we rest on the seventh year, then what are we going to eat? How can this system possibly ever work? It's a difficult system, right? We really have to have faith, and we have to rely on God, and we have to know that He's going to bless the land and do this miracle every 6th year and let the land grow. It's hard. It's difficult. So the human being naturally has hesitations and asks questions, and it is so natural to the DNA of a human being that the question itself is written in the Torah, right? That's so important. That the fact that the question itself is written in the Torah means it's so plainly part of the halacha, it's so plainly part of the law that it has to be written in the Torah itself. Because every single human being doubts God's bounty. Every single human being, it's natural to think and to hesitate and think that God is not going to bless us. But hopefully, most of the time, God blesses us. This is at least what we're promised. But wait a second. Right now, aren't we at a time when all the businesses are closed? Right? The New York pause has been extended all through mid-June. Right? Aren't we on pause? And we're just supposed to expect that blessing is supposed to come. That we're going to be okay. And I really hope, I pray in my heart that most people listening today have enough money to make it through. They have enough food to make it through. They have whatever they need. They have their health to make it through. That God has blessed them in a physical way. And if that hasn't happened for you, please talk to me. Please call the synagogue. Please talk to me. We can help you. We can connect you to the resources you need. But most people listening, if you're listening, we're still alive, we're still here. But let's be honest for a second. Let's be brutally honest for a second. Does everyone feel blessed right now? Almost 100,000 deaths in this country from COVID-19. Economic downturn that we haven't seen since the Great Depression. Is this making it? Is this flourishing? Do we feel great right now? Is this the blessing that God was talking about? Where's the blessing for the 6th year? Man, we should have all made like triple the amount of money in like January and February, and then this would have been perfect. Then we could all just be sitting here and have a party. God should have given us extra vitamins. We should have been perfectly healthy through COVID-19. Every single one of us. There shouldn't have been one of us who was sick. And Bezrat Hashem, with God's help, may that come around. May those who are sick right now be healed. But that's not the facts on the ground right now. There are many, many, many people suffering. And the rabbis knew this. The rabbis weren't naive. The rabbis understood that blessing is not always felt. And for that reason, they gave us the Haftorah, this unbelievable Haftorah on Parshat Behar, chapter 32 of Jeremiah. Chapter 32 of Jeremiah. Jeremiah was an unbelievable prophet. And the rabbis chose this particular Haftorah to answer us, to illuminate us what we need to know in this parsha, on this kushya, on this question we might ask that's troubling and burdening all of us. That, what about the facts on the ground? What about the people who are suffering right now? Has the blessing really come? And for that reason, we have Jeremiah. Jeremiah was told in the first chapter of Jeremiah that not only would he have to serve and tell the whole entire Jewish people that they were sinning and that destruction was coming and they had to turn their ways and change their ways and all this over and over again. But he was told on the first day of his prophecy, as initiation ceremony, that he wasn't going to win, that he wasn't going to see, that he wasn't going to turn the hearts of the Jewish people, that they were going to be conquered by a foreign kingdom, that they were going to be conquered by the Babylonians, an evil empire, and they were going to be conquered and exiled to Babylon. Can you imagine if on the first day of a very hard job you were told that you were going to fail? That no matter what, you're going to fail. But you got to do it anyway. You got to work hard. That was Jeremiah. He was one of the only prophets who over and over again start complaining about his job. He said, God, how could you be doing this to me right now? This is a horrible job you've given me. But of course, Jeremiah continues to do it. He does what God asks of him. He plays his role in history. And he plays his role and job that God's given to him, to try to push the Jewish people to turn around, to break the destiny, and to try to turn people's hearts around and prevent the coming disaster with the Babylonian Empire. And of course, the rabbis bring us straight to chapter 32. Now, what's happening in chapter 32? Towards the end of the book of Jeremiah. Jeremiah, we come into the scene and Jeremiah is sitting in the prison. He's sitting in a prison where? Not in Babylon, not in Egypt. Where is he sitting in a prison? He's sitting in a prison in Jerusalem, his beloved city itself. Why is he put in prison? Because King Tzidkiyahu, the king of the southern kingdom in Judea, in Jerusalem, put him in that prison. Because Jeremiah was prophesying against him, according to him. He said, Babylon's going to conquer you. You got to turn around. You got to change your ways. Tzidkiyahu, Melech Tzidkiyahu, the king of Judea, interpreted this as saying, what are you prophesying against my kingdom? You saying that Babylon's stronger than us? It's going to get us? We don't have anything to be afraid of. We're going to be fine. We're going to be okay. We're strong. We're going to make it. It's fine. And he throws him in jail as a traitor into the dungeons of deep in Jerusalem. So Jeremiah is literally sitting in the dungeons of Jerusalem as the conquering armies of the empire of Babylon, Emperor Nebuchadnezzar, comes in to conquer Jerusalem in 586 BC. He is sitting in the prison. Can you imagine how Jeremiah feels at this point? Utterly hopeless, utterly distraught. That over his whole entire lifetime, he worked to change the minds and hearts of the Jewish people. He was thrown in jail in his beloved Jerusalem. That he did not succeed. Utter darkness, utter plague. And we know that things won't turn out okay for Jeremiah himself. Jeremiah is going to be taken into exile into Egypt. And he's going to die in a cell in Egypt. Right? Not a happy ending for Jeremiah. Not an easy prophet. But right in the middle of the scene is something very interesting that I think is so illuminating to us. A kinsman of Jeremiah comes to him into the prison and says to him, please redeem the land of your ancestral holding. Jeremiah came from a land called Anatot, and he was told that he had to redeem this land, that they were going to lose it, and he had to redeem it. He had to buy it. And it's a ridiculous scene. It's an unimaginable scene at this moment. How could Jeremiah possibly redeem this land? How could Jeremiah possibly buy this land? It's ridiculous. He's literally sitting in jail. He's sitting in prison. Don't you think that his kinsman would have the courtesy and the kindness to say, maybe you should redeem yourself first before I go to you to redeem the land? What does Jeremiah care about the land right now? Judea is being conquered. He's sitting in prison right now. What does he care about the land? Why is his kinsman telling him to redeem some land that's outside of the jail that Jeremiah literally believes he'll never see again? And he won't see that land ever again. So much so that he protests afterwards. The guy says, am I ever going to see this land again? But even before he protests to God, he says to his kinsman, yes, I will redeem that land. Make a land deed and bury it deep in the earth. And I will acquire this land, and I will redeem this land. And it will be a permanent ancestral holding for our family. Isn't that unbelievable that Jeremiah did that? Jeremiah was sitting at the bottom of a deep pit, utter darkness, utter horror, the worst, darkest timeline. So much, and it wasn't going to get better. Like he was going to die in prison. Horrible times. Certainly, it wasn't experiencing God's blessing at that moment, as our Parsha in Behar says. Yet, Jeremiah bought and redeemed this land. So important that he bought and redeemed this land. Very good. And at that moment, he bought that land, even though he was at that low place. My friends, it was a symbol. It was a symbol what he was doing. That even though the Jews were at the lowest place possible, even at that place, that Jeremiah had to acquire this land. He had to acquire this holding. He had to plan. He had to redeem his land. He had to be a Jew at that moment, even though he was in utter darkness. And I want to say that this is what we are beckoned to do. We are beckoned to follow Jeremiah. This is what the rabbis are saying right now, that even when you don't feel the blessing, even when you don't sense God's blessing, even when you're in the deepest, darkest pit, that we're supposed to still plant seeds, that we're supposed to still redeem the land, that we're supposed to still be Jews, that we're supposed to still be who we are, that we're supposed to still live righteously, that we're supposed to still have our dreams for our children. As Americans, that's what we need to be doing right now. That is our destiny. That is our contract with God. That is who we are. And just because we sit in the darkness right now, and just because people are suffering, and just because we're not experiencing God's bounty at this exact moment, even if we might not experience it for a long time, where it's just been extended to June, where businesses are suffering and businesses are dying, people are getting hurt, we Jews need to be a seed of hope. We need to redeem the land, as Jeremiah did, even from the dark place. Do not wait to redeem the land once you're self-redeemed. Don't say, first redeem me, and then I'll redeem the land. No, we Jews, we self-sacrifice. We help others. Even when we're in a dark place, we still are Jews. We do acts of loving kindness. We do acts of chesed. We do mitzvot. Even though we're suffering, we still maintain our Judaism. We still maintain our connection to God. We still act according to our contract. We still do what God wants of us in this world, which is to act righteously, to follow our Torah, to study it, to learn it, to observe it, to do it. I hope and I beckon that this Shabbos we can all return back to being Jews again, even though we all are sitting in this pit of darkness, even though we all wish we were davening together, and I wish I wasn't talking to a video. Right? We still have to be Jews. We still have to celebrate our lives and our relationships that we have. We have to work to lift each other up, and we have to be the Or L'Goyim. We have to be a light to the nations. We have to be the candle blowing in the wind and help this country rise up out of its ashes, out of its horror, to help us stand back on our feet again, even in the sadness, and also be patient and suffer at this, even though we're suffering at this moment, and we'll continue to suffer, to hold out hope, if not for ourselves, for our children, and for others at this moment. Shabbat Shalom.